Hello, everybody. How are we today? Waiting for everyone to join. Setting up my space here a little bit. This is actually going to be the final episode in this particular series of Downtime 2020 Watches at Home with Ariel Adams. That does not mean that I'm going to be stopping to do live content. That does not mean I'm going to stop chatting with you people. But this is the end of the show where I just sort of have a pile of watches and talk about them. I'm going to be doing more directed conversations about fewer watches. I might take some of the same watches and talk about how they work together, some comparison. Hello, watch aficionado. How's it going? So, again, I've asked the question a few times to the audience over the last several days, and that is, how do you want me to interface with you after this series is over? So I said there was going to be more of these, but this is going to be the last of these particular ones where I sort of talk about my collection and stuff like that. It's going to be 20 episodes total. Oh, hello from Riyadh. Hello from Lac Le Monde. Hello, GMT Master. I know that you're Canada, right? Yes, hello, everyone. Hello, Sunny from Australia. Hello from London. Don't get so upset that I'm stopping to do these. I mean, there's still going to be stuff from me, lots of it, lots of content. I'm just trying to figure out the best way of doing it all. So some people have been asking about pocket watches, and I found this. This is an Orient pocket watch. Yes, that teal watch is a Zodiac. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is a interesting little Orient here that I thought was pretty nice. This came out quite some time ago. It's a relatively small pocket watch, but it has one of their movements of the power reserve on there. So I thought that was pretty nice. I don't know what to do with this thing, but it's cool. But so there it is. There's the pocket watch for the people that kept saying, what about the pocket watches? I actually have a few more pocket watches, but you know, there's a distinct set of collectors that likes pocket watches, and I guess that's. I think the problem with a pocket watch is, like, unlike a wristwatch that's there, it's out of the way, it's visible, it's useful. I don't know what to do with this. I mean, my pockets are kind of full as it is. I don't have one of those like waistcoats where I can like have it in my pocket and a little chain across my waist and all that. So there we go. This is an Orient. This is a made in Japan pocket watch, which has another in-house made movements, and they sort of. This is the early version of their manually wound with the power reserve. So they this was sort of an experiment. And again, I don't know how many of these were made, but this is pretty cool. All this Norquain talk recently. Yeah, look, you know, Norquain is a brand that is active right now, and a lot of brands are just not active right now. No one's doing anything. I mean, we talk to our colleagues at the brands. They can't go, you know, to the office. They can't ship watches out. The iPhone is the new pocket watch. That is correct. Smartphones are the new pocket watches. Brandon is saying you like the format, but we could focus on one watch per an episode. Yeah, that's more or less what we're thinking. Not necessarily one watch per an episode. Remember, we have our review videos that are more production value, that are a little bit more focused on a particular watch. So we already have that type of content. That there's nothing that's going to be new about that. But I guess the question is, how do I get more of a conversation going? Because I definitely want to be able to talk about issues in the industry, issues with collecting, issues with, you know, just sort of watch nerd talk, or just to answer your questions and things like that. When the brightness is a bit high, all right, let me lower this here. I guess that's doing the opposite way. Is that better? Better for the brightness? Lighting is always an issue here. I'm trying to, again, keep a pretty chill setup. This is with my phone. I would normally do this with a more professional setup. So the episodes we do that are one watch per an episode are great, but they don't really open it up to have just general conversation where we talk about whatever is on our mind. So what I'm probably going to be doing and I know it's not necessarily an ideal solution, but it's a good solution, is after this episode of Downtime 2020 is done, I'm going to be taking a lot of these conversations over to Instagram, and then I might be publishing some of them later on a playlist here on YouTube. Myself and the aBlogtoWatch team are trying to chat about it and figure out the best thing to do. So that is what some of the near future is going to be like. I definitely want to still be here for everyone, but after about 20 episodes or things like that, creatively, I want to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to take this Norcane off. This is the Freedom 60 Chrono. Great watch. Really been enjoying this one a lot. So this is a Swatch from a few years ago, and people don't really know that Swatch made watches like this. This is a fully automatic chronograph watch. The middle case is a clear plastic. The bracelet and the bezel on the case back are metal. And this movement is, I forgot the name of this movement. This is one of those ETA movements that's, I call this the baby 7750. And I really like to laugh about this because there's something funny that they sort of did here. And this, you have the same thing in other of these movements that are in some of the Swatch Group owned brands. It's not a 7750. So what essentially they do is they say, okay, this is a lower priced chronograph compared to our more expensive chronographs, but how do we visually sort of help differentiate the two, especially in a retail environment when a store clerk has to say, okay, this one right here is more expensive, but this one's less expensive, and why? And if you understand a chronograph, you know that it being able to measure 1 hour versus 100 hours is really just a matter of the gearing and the dial. So there's no technical difference in complexity between a chronograph measuring 1 hour and any number of hours. It's just the reduction gear and the ability to have a dial that says that. But what I think is funny they did is they made this chronograph a 6-hour chronograph as opposed to the 7750, which is a 12-hour chronograph. And I know that that was done specifically so that someone in a store can be like, well, if you really want to time up the 12 hours, you're going to have to go ahead and get this more expensive thing, which is amusing because all of us know that that's a completely arbitrary differentiation factor and that there's different things. Someone just ordered a bull of a precisionist. That's great. Those are cool. I don't know that really narrows it down. There's so many there. No pilot watches? I mean, there's literally a pilot watch right here. Like, this is like the pilot watch. So what do you mean no pilot watches? In fact, I'm looking here and I'm counting multiple pilot watches. Hello, humanity. Humanity says hello right back to you. As Citizen owns it? Are you talking about the bull of a precisionist? I like the precisionist. I have a few of those watches. The first ones were a little strange, were very big, but I like the precisionist. I have a bunch of them. Do I ever get overwhelmed with such a big collection? Maybe. I'm not necessarily sure. You were the only person that has a ball hydrocarbon? The hydrocarbon's cool. That's actually my older hydrocarbon. I'll get to that one in a second. So again, I don't remember the exact name of this watch. I believe we covered it in aBlogtoWatch quite some time ago. And just reminding everyone that not all, but pretty much all of these watches have some type of coverage on aBlogtoWatch. If you want to see a full article with pricing and sizes and my review and all that stuff, that's all there. Whatever happened to the Schwarzenegger watch range? I'm not really sure, but I believe that they were too ugly to be released. I think that Schwarzenegger himself, being a watch lover, looked at it, got the feedback from people, and said, while this is a nice experiment, I don't necessarily want to release these watches. So there was a big push about it, but I think the actual end product didn't really match Arnold's sense of being a watch lover himself, meaning like you couldn't really see him wearing a lot of the watches that were under his brand, and I think that was a problem. So those are cool, but I just remember thinking to myself, I don't know which one of these I want to wear. It was an interesting experiment, for sure. Somebody asked a question I think is very important. Is there a certain number where watch collection gets too big? And that's actually true. I'm a little bit different because I can handle this many watches and things like that. But I've noticed an interesting trend, and I think I brought this up in one of the early episodes of Downtime 2020, and that is that there's essentially a sweet spot between about 10 and 30 watches that most watch collectors can handle. So we know, for example, the significant percentage of the aBlogtoWatch audience members have been collecting watches for more than 10 years, some more than 20 years. And they mention that they get a certain number of watches per year. So if you do the math, everyone should have like hundreds of watches. But they don't. They have between 10 and 30 watches on average. Why? Because people actually thin out their collection. There is some type of intimidation factor that comes from having too many watches. And what they do is they either sell or trade or give away or whatever it is. So I guess the answer to your question is, statistically speaking, again, between 10 and 30 is what most collectors have, not necessarily, taking consideration the amount of time they've been collecting. So whatever it is, people get rid of watches at that particular threshold. What's the longest consecutive period of time you've worn a single watch? I mean, I'm not sure what the question is. I like to vary it up a lot, but I have watches that, are in my rotation. I think that's what people do. I have about, I don't know, maybe like somewhere between 5 and 10 watches that are in like my rotation. And that's a mixture of watches that I'm reviewing, watches that are my own. So that's the answer. So what's going on here? Owning and maintaining what was stressful for me. Yeah, it's a pain. Look, I think I've showed a bunch of watches here that are not maintained, in the sense like all the quartz watches where the batteries are dead. Like, I haven't been able to maintain those. I have watches that probably need to be serviced. I can't maintain that. You can't decide if I'm your watch pontiff or Carl Ruiz. I don't know who Carl Ruiz is. I apologize. I'm not sure. I thought Archie Luxury was the watch pontiff. Do I have an opinion on the Seiko Zimbe watches for Thailand? Look, Thailand, for whatever reason, has always had a lot of interesting limited editions. I don't know that I have an opinion on one or the other, but I don't understand the market per se, because I haven't actually been to Thailand myself yet. But I know that their retailers are able to command a lot of limited editions. So I'll just show this watch one more time. This was a few $100s. And I thought was really important about this watch is that you could have a fully mechanical automatic chronograph in a pretty decent form at an entry-level price point. And, this was supposed to be like your entryway. You buy this, and then what are you going to buy next? Maybe a Hamilton or a Longines or an Omega or something like that. So Swatch Group has always been very big about like starter point. I don't know that Swatch right now is as good of a starting place as maybe it used to be, but a product like this is definitely designed to be like your first nice mechanical watch. And I thought that was cool. So I'm trying to read the comments here. Mathematically, most watch collectors fail. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Fail how exactly? Someone has 7 and started thinning already. Yeah, so the number between 10 and 20, 10 and 30 is sort of an average. Yes, this is a watermelon candy. I will get to that. Sir. So many things to talk about. Difficult. So again, because this is the last episode, I have a few more watches here. Remember, this doesn't represent all the watches I have, but just some. Which countries out of Western world is trustworthy outside Japan? When you say trustworthy, I'm not sure what you mean. So I'm going to show you a watch here. Now, this watch, the strap disintegrated. You see the strap here? Here's the strap. And this happens a lot of the time where you go back in your collection and you see how things age. So a lot of straps, especially rubber ones, are not designed to last very long. So nothing special was going on with this watch. Just over time, the material disintegrates. So I think it's very interesting to see that. It probably broke under the weight. This was sitting in a box. So the funny thing is there was actually no weight or anything. This is a heavy watch. So this was, I believe, the Persepolis by Ritmo Mundo. And this had, there's still some plastic over here. This had 2 movements in it, back to back. You never knew that rubber straps disintegrate? Oh, they do, sir. They do. Rubbers and plastics age pretty poorly over time if they're the wrong type. I don't know how to explain the right type. I'm not a plastics and rubber material specialist, so unfortunately I can't comment on what would be the best type, but they are not all made equally. I tend to find that the nicer watches that have more expensive parts age better. So you do, in a degree, get what you pay for. A lot of sort of like the indie divers and the small ones are a few $100 here and there. They have rubber straps. After a few years, especially 10 years, those straps look like a freaking disaster. So this was about 54 millimeters wide, or something like that. Isn't this crazy? I think this was probably the most ambitious watch, or one of the most ambitious watches that Ritmo Mundo ever did, and that's actually a brand that's based out of here in Los Angeles. So yeah, this basically had two ETA movements in there, so you can see the rotor of the one back there, and it was one way of having a 2 time zone watch. You've mentioned Rosie O'Donnell so many times, and someone else mentions Roseanne Barr. I don't know why. Maybe there's some inside joke there, but I find that kind of amusing. My opinion on Fortis, pretty good. There's some of them. I actually had some Fortis watches that I was going to talk about here, but we're probably going to publish them in an upcoming review article. So look for that soon for some new Fortis watches. Let's see here. Watch Doctor says that he lives in Miami, and rubber straps are the only ones. Yeah, that makes sense. In humid environments, you got to wear the right type of strap. I would just say this: if you're buying a rubber strap, get the ones that are called caoutchouc, which basically just means rubber in French, but those are a slightly sort of higher end formulation. I wish I could speak more about how to get a good strap. Yeah, so people always wonder, like, what's up with this weird little thing here? And essentially, it's a bit vestigial. Vintage Omega are a hot item lately. Look, vintage everything's been a hot item lately because people are obsessed with this idea that they'll get some old watch which is worth more in the future, and people's bubbles burst constantly because they buy something. And if you buy a watch, buy it for your personal enjoyment. If you're buying a watch to sell later on to someone else, you are not included in this hobby as far as I'm concerned. You're included in something else. You're just basically a speculator. So anyway, so the idea behind this is as a system to ensure that you fully screw down your crown. So I don't know why this is that big of a deal. This is a 200-meter water-resistant watch. This is 300 meters. That's so weird, actually, that this is, because I'll explain why in a minute. Because I have here, I've been reviewing, I don't think we published it yet, but this is a newer generation engineer hydrocarbon. And the cases are actually a little bit different, and that's something I talk about in the review. These cases are similar looking, but they're not exactly the same. Certain things are the same. The bracelet's the same. But this watch, for whatever reason, says water resistant to 200 meters, which I actually don't believe. And then this watch says it's water resistant to 300 meters. I think this one is actually water resistant to 300 meters. Why it says 200, I don't know. And then over here, I showed this on another show. Sorry, just finding it over here. It's under a bag. Okay, here we go. So this is a ball. This is a different diver from ball. This is the World Time one. This is pretty neat. And this is water resistant to 300 meters. So this is 300 meters. This is 300 meters. Why this one is printed with 200 meters, I don't know. I don't know how this one is different from a structural perspective. They both have solid case backs. Everything looks pretty similar. This has a slight rounded crystal. And so these watches are separated by maybe not 10 years, but at least 8 years. And it's really nice to see that there has been a lot of iterative improvement from Ball. So the newer generation cases are a little bit nicer. And again, I take some pictures to show side by side how they're a little bit different. The newer ones wear a little bit better. I can't explain the difference in the water resistance. Anyway, so going back to here, this is not just a crown guard, but the idea is that this only closes if the crown is screwed in all the way. And so it's like a protection mechanism to ensure that the crown is screwed in all the way, because if it's not, water and dust and things like that can get in there. Looking back at the comments here, are the numbers have tritium? Yes. So both of these ball watches have tritium. This was called the Ceramic 15, and it was called that because I think this was one of the first hydrocarbon watches that had a ceramic bezel insert. But interestingly enough, here this is a sapphire crystal bezel insert. So both of these are really fantastic, but you see here just a little bit of a different design ethos. This is more traditional ball style with those sort of tritium tube created hour numerals, and this uses a different system, which is also tritium, but a little bit more modern in the way it's executed, even though it looks more classic. So let's put this watch on here. I've always thought these were very nice, very interesting system here with the buckle, the deployant. It's kind of like, it doesn't do that much, but it's very burly, and I like that. I remember each side has its own little individual like small diver's extension. Oh, someone's saying hello to me. Hello, Hilux Taco. Mason equals Roseanne Barr. I'm really failing to know the context there. I'm not really understanding. So this is the hydrocarbon ceramic 15. This was from several years ago. This was a really cool watch. The bracelet, I wish it had like one more like half link or maybe some micro adjust in here. I sometimes find that these watches, at least for my wrist anatomy, were always a little bit too big or a little bit too small. And so I actually sized this one a little bit larger than this bracelet. This one's a little bit smaller, so it wears a little bit tighter. But this is the hydrocarbon on the wrist. This is a weird thing. Ball has the chutzpah to call this a 40 millimeter wide watch, and 40 millimeters is just the measurement of the case back. So the bezel is like 42 millimeters, and of course it's larger with the crown, but sometimes we see that. We see brands that, for whatever reason, don't have consistency with the sizing, and that happens from time to time. It's like they're afraid that 42 is too big, so they want to say 40, and they're like, oh, but 40 was the case back. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Sorry, it's been so many comments here. Choose between a Seiko Zimbe or Longines Hydro Conquest Quartz. Look, nobody should be telling you what watch to buy. When you can't choose between a watch to buy, what I recommend you do is ask yourself, which one do you like to look at the most? That is, I have to explain chutzpah for our Gentile friends. It's sort of like a non-aggressive sense of obnoxiousness. It's sort of like, I can't believe they had the balls to do that. The ball, which is funny because it's a ball. Sorry, I'm kidding. Do I have a Ball Magneto S with the iris case? No, I love that watch. I know the one you're talking about. No, I don't have one of those, but those were super cool. That was really when Philippe NT was there, and then since he's gone, there's a lot less there. Admittedly, watches over 40 millimeters are great for self-defense. You remember the Sisu I had that was like 50-something millimeters? That was fantastic for self-defense. Fantastic. Okay, so what do we want to talk about next here? This is another Loom Tech, and I've been talking about this brand. I have no idea what's going on with the brand right now, but this is kind of an interesting hybrid between a pilot watch and sort of a modern military watch. This had a 28-24 movement in there. So I forget the name of this collection. It was the V3. This was the V3 collection. I love the sort of commentary here that goes between you guys. It's kind of fun. I don't always know what you're all talking about, but I hope you're having a good time. This was what I call an IWC style strap. What do I mean by that is because it has this sort of like, it goes down straight and it tapers right there. And I think IWC is known for doing that type of thing. What do you think about the single rivet? I always like the double rivets there on the pilot watch straps. So here you have the double rivet, and then here you have a single rivet. I kind of like the double rivet more, but I do like that it has like a screw in there. Kind of, I don't know, suggest. So that's the LoomTech V3. This came in different styles. This is an American company based out of Ohio, and I like to mention that because there's definitely some affinity amongst watch collectors in America for some American brands, because there's quite a few of them. Do I have any Boone straps? Recommend a brand? I don't know if I have a specific recommendation for who to get Boone straps from. There's some really nice ones out there, but probably a German. Speaking of German watches, this is a Laco, and we've talked about Laco from time to time. We designed a Boone strap for, the Radox that I designed. So I'll have to remind the person that made this strap, but that's what a Laco looks like on a Boone strap. I love Boone straps. I think they're amazing. I really think they're incredible. So this is one of the sterile dial Laco pilot watches. This is 45 millimeters wide. And you can see this is essentially, we modified the case, but you can see This is where we sort of got the case from, the idea. But you see how we made changes? It looks like the little screws on the side there. We made a lot of changes to it. It's not actually the exact case, but this is sort of the case that inspired the Radox. And again, this is a sterile dial one, which doesn't have any name of the brand on the watch. So you have it on the back there. It's a little fuzzy. Do I have to clean the lens there? All right, I can't even find my cleaning cloth. There it is. 1 second. So this is the case back of the Laco one. It meant to look a little bit like a military style, but that's the only place you can see Laco. This is, again, 45 millimeters wide. Laco produces this in 45, 42, and I want to say 39. So there's a lot of different sizes there. But Pilot watches are one of the few watches that can look good. Boulang & Sons M65 Boons. Yes, I've heard good things about Boulang & Sons. So that's 45 millimeters wide. And Pilot watches are one of the few that, for me, kind of look good if they're a little bit too big. Panerais also look like that. There's sort of an oversized flattery that happens because it looks kind of cool. You can't do that with too many watches. Sterile dial, safer in a COVID environment. Thank you, Jay. That is a good pun on the term sterile dial, because it's not exactly what that's about. But yes, thank you. I think that Pilot watches are fashionable. If you're not into watches, you just sort of want a good classic look. Pilot watches, they add a good sense of adventure and masculinity, but you never really have to feel like you're wearing a brand. And so Pilot watches of this ilk are made by so many companies. There's like probably 10 companies that make watches similar to this. Laco makes them, Archimede makes them, Azimuth has made them. I think, like probably Stoa makes stuff like this. There's just a bunch of brands that have their own sort of traditional German, Flieger style watches. And they're all a little bit different. Of course, IWC makes them as well. IWC has their own little take on there, but I'm talking about like really emulating this sort of dial style one-to-one. So IWC, Glashütte Original, the Navigator, just dropped the watch. The Glashütte Original, the Senator Navigator watches, they don't make them right now, but those are some of the coolest ones because they're very nicely made, but they're not really flashy. So I really like those. Long make a Pilot watch again. I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about the original Lange Pilot watches and how those are quite controversial if you really want to talk about them. What else should I go to here? I was like jumping around all over the place. So here's an interesting watch from a bunch of years ago. This is also technically Pilot style. This is from a brand called Techni. And this watch, talk about them? You mean the SS watches, the Nazi ones? Yes, a lot of German companies were forced to make Nazi watches during World War II. And they, so Lange has a Hitler watch and Lange has an SS watches. So look, it's what they had to do. It wasn't like it's what you had to do during the time. Not like they're proud of it, but it's in the museum. There's a watch in Glashütte Original. They sponsor the museum in Glashütte, and in that museum is the watches from a bunch of brands, including A. Lange & Söhne. And the Glashütte Watch Museum has a watch that's a Lange that was, I think, it was a gift that Adolf Hitler bought for someone else. So he bought it as a gift for someone else, and there was like a signature thing. It's creepy, but it's there. It's real history, but that's what you did. So again, when this watch came out, this is more than 10 years ago now. This was before two things happened. It was before there was as many micro brands, and it was before there was as much sort of retro revival. And so this watch was really exciting to a lot of people because it was inexpensive and it was mechanical. So what this had was a Chinese version of a Venus chronograph movement. So let me try to open it up here to show you. Sorry about that. And again, this was cool because it was literally just a few $100, and you couldn't get anything at the time, even remotely close, that had, a display case back and a nice traditional mechanical movement. So this is a Chinese version of a design that was originally Swiss. It was the Venus something. I forgot the exact caliber name. And people were like, wow, that's so cool for a few $100. So this is a manually wound chronograph. And I mean, this was fine. I liked it. But for whatever, people used to like go up to me and be like, can I buy your Techni? And I was like, why? Is it a seagull? I'm not sure if it's a seagull. You'll have to go back to the article on aBlogtoWatch about this. This again, the brand is called Techni, and I actually ran into the proprietor of the brand. He's still doing watch stuff. So I don't think they're making any of these, but this was kind of a cool thing. This couldn't have been done today. This watch, I don't know that the movements would be available. It'd have to be more money, but at the time, like I said, more than 10 years ago, this was really something. People just freaking love this thing, and good for them. Good for them. So let's take that off. It was fine for me, but it's just like I'm not that much into sort of like vintage style military watches. I want a little bit more, bling to it. A little bit more bling. Here is I have two Maurice de Mauriac watches. This is the Zurich-based brand. This was one of the Gulf watches that had the Gulf colors, matching strap. This is sort of, racing inspired. This dial is originally sort of a pilot watch style dial that was designed by them. And the funny thing is there's certain companies that kind of copy this. Like Maurice de Mauriac basically is intent on the fact that Richard Mille copied certain elements of the font and things like that. So I don't know the full story and argument, but it's true that the large companies look to the smaller brands and they emulate as much as they want to. This watch has a 7750 in there, and I always like that most all of the Maurice de Mauriac watches have a display case back. This is the 42 millimeter wide case, I believe, or maybe 45. They made 39, 42, and 45 millimeter wide sizes. Well, I don't know what that is. 39, 42, and 45. Something about those sizes tend to be very, very popular. So that is the 42 millimeter wide version. Yes, this is the Gulf racing colors. I did mention that. And they're attractive. And there's so many watches out there that have done the Gulf racing colors. This is just sort of one of them. Very legible dial. Just a lot of fun. Just a nice Swiss-made, watch with a 7750 automatic in there. Very decent stuff. Yes, the tumor. It's not everyone's in the color. Not everyone's in the color. Again, if you don't like this color tone, not a problem at all. I will not fault you. No one is guilty because they don't like a color tone. This is a little bit more of a universally appealing Maurice de Mauriac. This is actually my first Maurice de Mauriac watch ever that I got. This was really a nice one. This has actually a solid gold bezel, so that is actually kind of nice. Yes, the pocket watch. Yes, if you weren't here, Buick boy, you were asking about, there's a little Orient pocket watch with a nice in-house made movement in there, manually wound with a power reserve. I like that. Couldn't handle watching any more of AC3's live stream. So what goes on to those streams? Like, people seem to like them. I had a good chat with him a couple of days ago. We did an Instagram live. Unfortunately, there was no way of saving it or no way that I understood to save it. So that we spoke for well over an hour. People seem to be very engaged. We had a good time. He loves to swear. I actually told him on the phone, I was like, Paul, I know that your character, Archie Luxury, swears a lot, but let's keep it a little family friendly. And we did. He's a very different personality with me. You have to understand, he's a performer and a business person. And so the Archie Luxury character is an exaggerated version of, him. He doesn't have to do that all the time. You don't want to know, trust me. So again, this watch, more than 10 years ago is when I originally acquired it, and still looks good today. Black case with the gold bezel, and that's a good look. The black and gold look, I always think works very, very well. Really a winner, and so nice to see after all these years that you put it on the wrist and it still looks and feels fantastic. Someone saying lame fake personality. That's his normal personality. That's a whole... I'm not going to get into it. I think he's an interesting character, but look, he has to make a lot of content, and that's one way. Making content is hard. It's not that simple. This is a Sablier. This is a brand that was created by a doctor who lives in New Jersey. And you can actually buy these watches at the store called Hamilton Jewelers. They have a few locations, but they carry these in their Princeton store. So I was I was brought out by Hamilton Jewelers a couple of years ago during one of their watch fairs when the Princeton School has their, I don't want to call homecoming maybe? It was some type of thing. It was like an alumni thing that they do every single June or July. And so I went to the store and I was there and met a bunch of aBlogtoWatchers, which was really nice. And it was interesting to see the brand there. And this is sort of inspired by his love of wine. So the seconds hand is supposed to look like a corkscrew. But I guess what's interesting is that the crystal is concave, right? So it's rather than domed, it's concave. And that materially changes the legibility. So I find that to be quite interesting to see that concave dial there. I think they've come out some different styles, smaller watches since then. But this was cool, and I love the concave look there. Nice strap, definitely more than halfway decent strap there. So that's the sablier on the wrist, a little big for my wrist there, but it's legible and nicely done, and it's aged pretty well. Trying to look here. Funky seconds hands are an acquired taste. I love me some funky seconds hand when they're all twisted around and weird and all that. I love me some good funky seconds hands. I mean, we were talking about the Talker Skytrain, how the seconds hand has that little airplane that looks like it's moving around. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but I'd never seen anyone do it. Do I have any oiled field watches? Like the Resins? I had the opportunity to wear and play with a Sinn, a UX, that's oil filled. I do like oil filled watches, but again, the problem with those is they're quartz, and if you want to get them serviced, it's or just have the battery change, it's kind of a pain. So I love those. They're sort of on my list. A couple days ago, I brought out a watch from OWC, which is an Australian company, and this is another one. This has a So Proud movement, and it's basically just the love child of Dan Falk. He loves watches, and he wanted to be inspired by a lot of the vintage, Rolexes and things like that he likes. So this is one of them, which I think was well done. He's made a lot of iterative improvements over the years, but this is one of the OWC watches. 40 millimeters wide, very well made, nice and chunky. If you're looking for like a good 40 millimeter, like I'll call it dive watch, Submariner style dive watch, and you want it to be from a cool little brand, and you have some affinity for Australia, OWC would definitely be a watch. So it is a Rolex homage, but in a way that's a little bit different. He has this psychological desire to try to replicate Rolex himself. He's not trying to copy. It's sort of like, given the tools and suppliers available to me, how good of a watch can I make? And those watches are standard for me, so how much can I sort of follow those? Which is a very different type of mentality than a lot of the people saying, Rolex is popular. I will make a watch that looks like Rolex, therefore my watches will be popular. That's not the mentality that OWC is going on. Moving on to something completely different. This is a Leap. This is a Paris-based French brand. They call this the Mach 2000. And this came out a while ago as a recreation of a watch from the late 60s, early 70s, I believe. This was quartz, and this is, one of the most French-designed watches I have. I believe that very impressive designers such as Elaine Silberstein were probably very directly inspired by brands like Leap. And France has a pretty interesting history of watch design. There's, of course, a lot of watches still, designed and made in France today. It's kind of complicated because a lot of the times it's like, well, if it's French watch, let's just have it made Swiss made. You have a few watches that proudly say Fabrique en France. And so French watches is an interesting area, dominated by certain big companies, that you don't necessarily think of as being French brand, like Cartier. Cartier is a French brand. Yes, their watchmaking is done in Switzerland. Bell and Ross, Paris-based brand, even though they're Swiss-made watches. So France's contribution to modern watches is extreme. A lot of the people working at the Swiss-made factories, especially in the Jura, which borders France, are French, even though it's in Switzerland. Is Yima a good brand these days? I guess it depends on the watch. I wish Leap would remake a manually wound version of that. Yeah, that would be cool. This is quartz. I don't have the battery in there, but this is just sort of a funky design that I thought was neat. I don't wear this very much, obviously, but this is really cool. Is that a Santos Galby at the back? No. It's a Santos, but it's not a Galby. Galby is a smaller version of it. This is the Santos 100, and this is the rare version that has the full-size bracelet on there. So I had been looking for one of these for a long time. When you pull those knobs, do the hands spin? Oh, on the Leap? Yeah, I mean, these are pushers for the chronograph, and this one's just the crown. That's just how they wanted to do crowns, just those colors. This sort of yellow, blue, and red, you see these sort of common on a lot of watches. I don't necessarily know what that means. They're not the primary colors, so I'm not sure what that is, but it's an attractive. Do I like the Roadster? Yeah, Cartier's probably going to come out with a new Roadster, I'd say in the next couple of years. I think the Roadster is more than ready for a return. They've been returning things back. They're really, a couple of years ago it was the Santos. Now they're still very heavily invested in the Santos. One of the problems with Cartier, like many of these brands, is they don't know how to have a separate campaign for men. These are companies that really, really have to differentiate their businesses between the female-oriented business and the male-oriented business. And unfortunately, for us, brands that focus on selling both male and female watches, the female watches tend to win a lot. So look at Bulgari, for example, or Cartier, or Chanel. Chanel doesn't make that many men's watches, but the marketing is just overwhelmingly female. And us watch lovers, we get nothing. So this is another Ite Noi. I was showing a couple of Ite Nois the other day. The one with the Hebrew characters, the hour numerals, is my favorite. This one, I think it was called the X-Ray or something like that. And there's something quite interesting about this watch I think is important to talk about. Have you ever bought a watch from one of those TV shows? Like the Shop NBCs or Shop, Home Shopping Network? I've never purchased a watch from one of those shows, but as a guilty pleasure, I used to watch them. I remember when I was in law school in San Francisco, I just loved eating dinner while watching those things with this weird guilty pleasure. There was a gentleman named Jim Skelton. We know each other. I didn't know him at the time, who was on there talking, and there was a few other personalities. And it was like this weird guilty pleasure because, I didn't have an outlet for watch talk. So I'm like, oh, look, people are talking watches, there, even though they're not watches I care about, they were talking watches, and I liked it. But no, I haven't purchased watches this way. Okay, so this Ite Noi, the X-Ray, the idea is essentially this, which I find fascinating. So inside the watch is a unitas, right? And this is not, of course, a skeletonized dial. This is a traditional dial. But the schematics actually show exactly what's underneath. So the reason it's called the X-Ray is because this is what you would be looking at right underneath the dial. So there's a little bit of skeletonization here. This is open right here, which is kind of neat. But otherwise, it's just a solid dial. But they're showing you exactly what's underneath it. So yes, Ite Noi is an Israeli watchmaker, very low production, make their own straps, very creative. And so I thought this was very nice because it had its own take on skeletonization. Because one of the problems with a lot of skeletonized watches is they're impossible to read. And if you've looked here, I don't have a lot of skeletonized watches. Why? Because I'm not at all interested in watches I can't read the time on. That is a very important thing for me. If I'm going to wear a watch, I want to be able to see the time. That's very, very crucial to me. I don't know why this loop here is so small. Anyway, so that's the X-Ray on the wrist. This was 44 millimeters wide. And that's actually a great size because I showed you some of their other watches that were a little bit bigger. The one with the Hebrew characters was a slightly smaller case, actually, that didn't have these sort of, these little protrusions for the screws. But this is nice. This is nice stuff. I really like this thing a lot. And this is sort of a cool timepiece. Any recommendations on... It is the concept of time, not the time that is important. It's also the time for me. I like legible watches. So if I can't read the time, I don't... Is this my Pesach watch? It might have to be, sir. Yes, I might... That's That's a good point. Not going to be a lot of matzo ball soup this year. That is really tragic. You know, some of my family members, they want to do like a video Passover thing, and I'm like, you know what? If there's not going to be the food, I don't know what the incentive is to sit through all that, right? These are from Undone. These are the Money Man watches. Oh, I got something special to show you guys that I'll show you in a second. It's interesting. So this is the Undone Money Man collection. This is one of them, and I'll show you the other one. And Gerlach watches, I think I saw one of those one time. I guess they're okay. I'm not really coming up in my mind with exactly the design. I remember the name, but Gerlach, that sounds familiar. Someone will have to send me a link about that one. So this was a collaboration with a designer named Stephen Bliss. And we heard my thoughts on Fair yet. I've seen a Fair. They're fine. They're fine. They're a little, you know, in a sense, they're like a little bit like Nomos in the sense it's kind of colorful and friendly, like a nice boy's watch. Not very masculine, in my opinion. Maybe I'm thinking about the wrong ones. I just remember some of them they're cool, but they're very youthful. Let's put it that way. They're very non-threatening. I want people to be a little afraid of me when they see my watches. Yes, of course, this is an Undone. Of course, it's going to be Rolex-esque. But Stephen Bliss is the gentleman that was the art director for the Grand Theft Auto games. And a lot of people grew up with the Grand Theft Auto games. I'm not saying they're the best games in the world, but remember the ads? Grand Theft Auto video games have sold incredibly well. And until recently, Stephen Bliss was their artist. And so that's interesting to me. And he created this interesting concept starting with Monopoly. So he took Monopoly, he changed the theme of it, and designed some watches for Undone. And the oddity of that collaboration is what impresses me the most. So I like this one, but it's not my favorite of them. I'll show you my favorite one in a second here. And I just thought they did this whole custom packaging. Really cool. I mean, it's just, I love it. It's not expected. I like things that are not expected. If it's not expected, I'm like, wow, that's great. And this is the other one. This was called the Benjamin, which was inspired by, you know, the US dollar. And I was like, wow, I never thought that a watch dial that's inspired by Monopoly and US currency would be, you know, this nice looking. I just never would have assumed that this would have come out well. But I think that Mr. Bliss did a really good job on this dial. And there you have the Monopoly guy, or Uncle Pennybags as he's known, with these guns of cash. And it's, I wrote a lot about the psychology about this watch in the review on aBlogtoWatch, which people can think a little bit more about. But again, for a few $100, this is fun. And if you're into Grand Theft Auto or into Stephen Bliss or just want something different, the funny thing is this doesn't really appeal to anyone who just likes Monopoly, but I don't think there's anyone out there who does just like Monopoly. I don't think there are just like amazing Monopoly fans out there. The yellow watch in the back, everyone always asks, this is also an Undone, but this is the Undone that I designed. So this is a mechanical watch. This is the Undone Aqua Black and Yellow. I creative directed this watch with Undone, so this is a great one. Yeah, I mean, look, watches are supposed to make you feel something, and if there's a nostalgic element to it, then great. So when someone says, that reminds me of this or that reminds me of that, that's what you want. I mean, we buy quote-unquote collector's watches today because looking at them reminds us of something. Is Undone a brand? Undone is a brand. Yes, it is. It's a Hong Kong-based brand that we like because they have really fun, affordable watches. So if you're just getting into timepieces, they're a great one. Okay, everyone, so I'm going to show you something really, really quick. This is, what I'm showing you is technically not lawful, but it's cool. It's cool. So this is, I'm about to show you, this is not actually one of my watches, so I just happen to have this with me. What I'm about to show you is a modified Rolex. Okay, I actually promised that I would not talk about Rolex watches at all in this show, but since this isn't my Rolex, that's okay. Thoughts on Linda Verdelin? Not bad, not bad. Sorry, I'm just getting the watch out here for you. So the watch I'm about to show you is a modified Rolex with an aftermarket dial that is meant to appear like dials that Rolex made in the 1950s. So this is a modern watch with a dial made by someone else, but meant to take sort of the look of an old Rolex and get it with the new Rolex. So this is the watch. So this is a modern Datejust 41 with an aftermarket dial. And people who are Rolex collectors knows that in their history, they did some painted dials. So this is a hand-painted dial. But again, Rolex doesn't make anything like this right now. So I just thought that was really neat. The quality of the dial is really fantastic. So this company is doing these sort of like one by one for people. And I just thought this was really something. Kill it with fire? Well, look, the lawsuit part of it comes from the fact that, you know, you can't just replicate the Rolex name. You can't just do that. Like, that goes into a whole can of worms. I actually wrote about the design, individual design. Oh, I forgot the name of it, but I wrote about this green carbon Daytona, and I spent a lot of time talking about the laws and sort of some of the practical things around aftermarket Rolex watches. But it's pretty nice, right? So this is inspired by a dial that Rolex actually did. It's just a larger one. It's a passion project, but you know, you couldn't just put this in a store and sell it. That would be kind of a little bit of a no-no. What is the point if the date model for it to be deleted? What does that mean? What is the point of it being a date model for what to be deleted? Well, again, the whole idea is that they made these dials and they want to put it in a modern Rolex, and this is a nice one. But this is pretty cool. I just want to show it to you guys because, again, this is not the end of me doing videos on YouTube, but this is going to be the final episode of Downtime 2020 Watches at Home with Ariel Adams. I'm going to be a little bit more direct and a little bit more less free form in some of the future episodes. Here's a watch from another dead brand. This is a Vogard. And this was, I don't know if they sold this model because I had it with a particular special strap. I just thought that was cool. And when Vogard went under, they wanted an exit plan. So what Vogard did is sell this technology to IWC. So the IWC time zoner is basically the Vogard time zoner. That's what this collection was called, the time zoner, because Vogard had a patent on the system where you open up this sort of lever here, it unlocks the bezel, and the bezel allows you to change the time. So this is sort of a travel watch. You can see that the city reference ring is on the top there, but this is sort of a different take on the travel watch, and they did it quite well. And then, like I said, Vogard went out of business and sold the patent to IWC, who's used it for, I don't know, 1 or 2 watches or something like that. These were nice. They were a little bit on the pricey side, but love those hands. Aren't those great hands? Super strong hands. Sword hands. Yes, a GMT watch. Just for you, sir. Just for you, GMT Master. I'm so happy that I was able to satisfy you with one. But again, I still think the Vogard had just fantastic hands. Really nice hands. Who keeps talking about Invicta? I actually found my old Invicta that I bought before I even started aBlogtoWatch, and I was like, let's see here, secret compartment watches. Boy, whatever happened to RJ watches? Well, they're out of business now. That happened. I'm bringing out another Marlin. This is a Timex Marlin in a different tone. This was just a few $100 with a Miyota movement in there. 40 millimeters wide. This competes with sort of like, I would say, an Orient Bambino. This is a little bit more little bit more sort of like modern style than Bambino. Bambinos are great as well. I love Bambinos. But why is something like this good? I don't wear suits very often, but I like having the right watch for the occasion, and I find that's the case. Most people put their money in sport watches and leisure watches, and they don't really want to put a lot of money into a dress watch. So I love watches like this. They're a few $100, still mechanical, but give you a dressy option for when you need it. Are Miyotas unidirectional? They might be. I don't know, actually, off the top of my mind. Yeah, I think this one might be unidirectional. Hard to say for sure. What's next? Okay, this bracelet was the most complicated bracelet I have ever had to change. This is a Tag Heuer link. This is a few generations old. This was also a quartz model. Again, a watch that I got, pre me really being into all this, just sort of showing what some of my tastes are and things like that. This bracelet, though, is still to this day absolutely incredible. And the new Link does a great job. It has a different kind of bracelet. They actually simplified it a little bit. But the dial of the new Link, I don't think has as much sort of personality here. But this is an older Tag Heuer Link that the bracelet still just is incredible. Incredible. Let's see here. Why do they call the Casio Duro a Duro? I don't know what the Casio Duro is. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that term. How are Fortis nowadays? So many questions about Fortis. We have a Fortis review coming up. The Fortis watches I've seen lately are different than some of the older ones. So it actually appears to me that they are upgrading the overall Fortis collection. I had a Fortis watch that I showed on this show earlier on a few episodes ago. Oh, here's another Timex. This is one of the quartz ones. It's like $150, but it's like, look how nice that is for $150. Just a simple chronograph, super legible, straightforward. There's Indiglow. You see the Indiglow? So it's got the Indiglow black backlight. I thought this was really nice. Do I have any Chrono Swiss? I reviewed a Chrono Swiss a little while ago, but I don't think I have any Chrono Swiss watches in my collection right now. I think there was like one called the Train Master or something like that I liked. That's not what they're doing now. Look, their specialty is in regulator watches, and regulator watches are a niche. They're fine. They're not for everyone. I think they're okay. But again, this watch was like $150, and I just thought this was really nice for that amount of money. Just a super. It's a basic tool watch. Attractive coloring. They knew to not use like white, sort of off-white colors to make them a little bit more attractive. But if you want to get like a nice watch as a gift for someone, that's where I really like to sort of like talk about watches like this, because you can't just go out and buy someone as a gift like a several $1,000 watch. That doesn't make sense. So you have to have sort of like a stable of brands that you can buy that are less expensive. So Timex and Undone and things like that are all brands sort of in that category that I feel make for good gifts. Louis Erard is nice. So one of the Louis Erard regulators that I'm trying to get is the one that they did with Alain Silberstein. Was I shocked when RJ filed for bankruptcy? Yeah, especially since we had a contract with them for some work that they had just signed, and then they went out of business, and we were like, that sucks. Here's another obscure watch here. This is from a company called Walden. This is another American one. This is a black titanium cased dress watch with red hour indicators and a 7751. So what an interesting assortment of parts. Titanium dress watch, black and red dial, 7751 automatic movement. That's a 7750 that has some additional complications on there. Nice strap. This was not inexpensive. I think we published a review on this one. This was not an inexpensive timepiece, but it was an interesting one. Oh, you have the Silberstein regulator? You can have it for a review if you like. Let me see what I discuss with them. I like that. It's I don't know the mechanics of borrowing audience members' watches to review them. I guess if we met up or something like that, it gets complicated. I wouldn't want someone to ship their watch and all that nonsense. It seems like such a pain. Very nice of everyone though for offering. The one problem this watch had was the AR coating. I think this watch would have been so much nicer if they just had a crystal with a little bit more AR coating. A very common problem. But again, this has a traditional quality to it. This Walden, you don't really know about the brand. It's not very pretentious, but it's interesting. And that's, I keep saying to people, wear watches for yourself. The more original the watch, the better. The less original the watch, the less original of a statement it makes about you. So watches should be a manifestation of your personality. Speaking of lume, this dial is all lume. This is sort of a custom watch from Angular Momentum. I think they're still around, but that brand, Angular Momentum, especially about 10, 15 years ago, had literally some of the weirdest watches you will ever see anywhere. Weird stuff. And they liked lume, and they just... again, this was sort of like almost a sport watch kind of dial. in a non-sport watch thing. Just an interesting brand. But can you imagine? Obviously I can't do it here too much, but can you imagine what the lume is like on this thing? Pretty neat, right? This company had some like way out there steampunk style watches before that was popular, and they did some cool stuff. But this is just sort of a little taste. Speaking of pocket watches and the fact you like big watches, I think I know where this comment is going. Have I ever tried to convert one? No, I don't have the patience for that. Walden make watches for Tourneau. Okay, that's good information. Do I think about Ming watches? They're fine. They're fine. I mean, Ming is a nice guy. He's got good taste. They're good watches. They're fine. I mean, they are what they are. Let's talk about the Zodiac. So this Zodiac, this is still in the packaging. I actually had one of these that I was wearing that I gave as a gift to a member of the aBlogtoWatch team, but I liked it so much. So this watch, I called this watch the Watermelon Candy, and someone else referred to it as the Watermelon as well. And I actually sort of, when I came up with that name, I made a little bet with Zodiac. I was like, okay, so you know that at Seiko, consumers come up with names for the watches, which are different than the series of letters and numbers that Seiko normally uses for the watches. And I said, when a watch has a name, whether it's given by the brand or the community, that watch does better and is a little bit more popular. So I said, I'm going to come up with a name for this watch. I call it the Watermelon Candy. And you'll see that as a result of that, more people will be interested in it because that having an actual name makes it more relatable. And that's exactly what happens. Are you going to do more car and watch reviews? Those are incredible. I mean, I've done a few of those. Those are incredibly time consuming. I got to borrow a car. I got to drive the car. I got to take pictures of the car. And taking pictures of a car is a different ordeal than taking a picture of a watch. There's nothing wrong with it. It's like, you trust me, I put in about 50 or 20 hours of work for one watch review. A car and watch review doubles that amount of time. And as much as I'd like the feedback, those don't necessarily pay. So I can only put, I can only dedicate a certain number of my hours for editorial. I guess the future, which would be great, is having a subscription model. So maybe 10, 15 years from now, hopefully less, we'll be in that place. But I think that in the future, having a subscription model rather than relying on advertising can be a lot better, because that way we can directly understand the editorial people want and get funding for it. But that's a business conversation about online media in general. Once again, this is the Zodiac Super Seawolf 53, and this is a particular version that I called the Watermelon Candy that came out a few years ago. That's pretty nice. Does it scream Miami? Sure. So I have. Let's just say that keep your mind on the Super Seawolf 53 for a while. There may be something interesting coming out from Zodiac that I'm involved in. We shall see. Let's see here. We're almost out of time. I actually haven't even sized this strap yet. This is the Sinn 206 Arctis. This came out recently. This is a remake of the 203 Arctis that was one of my original Grail watches. I loved the 203 Arctis so very, very much. I never got one. And so when Sinn sort of came out with a new version of it, they called it the 206. The case is 2 millimeters wider. It's 42 versus 40. And we already published a review of this watch with a black dial, but the Arctis has this beautiful, what I call the ice blue metallic. It looks like ice blue waters. This is the rubber strap, but I'm going to be primarily wearing this on the matching steel bracelet. But this for me this represents an ideal, right? You have one of the best tool watch makers on the planet. And this is one of the most iconic designs that has a little bit of flashiness to the dial. I mean, let's be honest, that's not a purely utilitarian dial. That's supposed to be a little bit flashy, with a bunch of other little things in there, like, the capsule to absorb water and it being filled with the gas so that there isn't any humidity that fogs it up, and how much they really focus on regulating the 7750 automatic movement. This is for me like an ideal. So like a watch like this, if I had to choose to wear one every single day, I might not be fully satisfied wearing a watch every single day, but a watch like this on the bracelet, if I had to wear it every single day for like a year, I'd be totally okay with that. And so if someone says like, what is it, Ariel, that really gets you excited? It's tool watches with a little bit of flair. This is a tool watch with a little bit of flair. This is a tool watch with a little bit of flair. So tool watch is a little bit of flair. No flair, no fun. No fun, what's the point? I'm trying to think if there's anything else here. Again, there's more watches in my collection that I haven't talked about, and maybe I'll do that at some point in the future, but 20 episodes of me talking about watches. So I've put in, more than 20 hours, this whole series with production and talking to you and all that, probably about 30 hours of time. And I feel like I could keep going. I feel like I could keep talking and talking and talking to everyone about watches and why I like watches and why everyone should like watches and just sort of talking about these things. And I find that fun. So I want to do more of these types of shows with you. Like I said, this is going to be the last one where I have a pile of watches and I talk about it like this. We're going to do more concentrated selections where I say 3 or 5 watches that fit a theme. But it's also very important for me to know what you feel other watch lovers want to know about. Every one of you listening to the show, and I really appreciate it, is a hardcore watch lover. You don't necessarily need the sort of like 101 conversation on how to understand watches. By the way, here's a Dietrich TC. I've been showing these with the black coated one. I didn't show you too many with just the steel. So this is the Dietrich TC with the black dial. This is probably the most classic one. So please give me your feedback, and also put yourself in the shoes of a novice collector who's just getting into it. And remember, all the media which is being thrown to them online is trying to get them to buy something or get into something or follow some bandwagon or some supposed tastemaker or something like that. They're going to be misdirected. So what is it that I can do to not only give entertainment and information to very mature watch lovers like yourselves, but how can I bring in new people? What are some of the considerations? Because you guys are online all the time. You know more about what these people are seeing. I silo myself off. I don't read the content or view the content from the competition. There's various reasons why I do that, because I'm trying to remain creatively focused. I don't want to accidentally be inspired by something else. Creative people oftentimes do this type of siloing thing. It's not to be rude to others, but because I want to focus on originality. So it's very important for me to work in a vacuum where the content that I make isn't influenced by anything else. But that means that I'm a little bit blind sometimes to like what some of the other yahoos on YouTube or Instagram are talking about. So help tell me where I need to correct that behavior or I need to supplement that information with potentially better information. What gets someone as hot as Teddy Boulder Star's girlfriend on the channel that will entertain viewers? Okay, people want more chicks. I get it. The stream that I did with David was enjoyable. Wasn't all about money and so is that really what everyone's about? They're just talking about money and Rolex. I don't look. I mean, those conversations are really short. Should you invest in watches? No. Should you buy watches over retail price? No. That's it. I don't need to have a conversation. I'll just say one more time. Do not buy a watch for over retail price. Okay? Don't do it. Don't do it ever. If you just have a bunch of money, you don't care, and you want that Daytona right now, fine. But if you are someone that is concerned about money, do not buy watches over retail. Friends don't let friends buy watches over retail. It's not like those are the only watches. There's thousands upon thousands of excellent watches out there that you can purchase under retail or at retail. Why is anybody spending over retail? Do not play that game. It's bad for the industry. It's bad for collectors. It's bad for the hobby. Okay? I just vintage for advanced people only. I think that people getting into watches should stay away from vintage for the first 5 years. Vintage is complicated. It comes with headaches. There's quality issues. There's some amazing stories, beautiful watches, but most vintage watches make for, in my opinion, pretty poor wearing experiences. Okay? So buy newer stuff to begin with, and just if you just don't buy over retail. I can't feel like that. Producer Mike, oh, I saw one of those videos. That guy is a little strange. He seems like he could be friendly enough, but his videos just come across as being like abundantly unauthentic. I'm creeped out by that stuff a little bit. I'm definitely creeped out. I mean, again, the sort of notion of let me take you with me while I go spend money on watches it's a sort of form of obscenity. I don't like it. Maybe I don't know. I don't like the sort of like conspicuous displays of supposed wealth, because I'll tell you what, I know plenty of actual very wealthy people, and they would never do that. They would never be like, come with me and watch me spend money. They know that they need to be discreet about it. They know that they don't necessarily want the government to know that they're spending money. Think of all the times that in America, the IRS got people for extra taxes because they're sitting there putting pictures of themselves with boats and fancy cars and watches on social media. Like, actually rich people would do that, okay? I'm telling you that for a fact. So if someone is going on and pretending to buy a bunch of expensive watches on social media, it's a game. It's just a weird thing. Anyways, sorry. You know me, I like to rant. Has face paint? Yeah, he's kind of a clown. So okay, everyone. I've gone 70 minutes. I wanted to go a little bit over here because again, this is the last of these shows. I will continue to speak. Pay a little bit of extra attention on Instagram for content. You see, the thing is, this is a very personal thing that I do, but the aBlogtoWatch channel needs to be a little bit more business facing. So during sort of the COVID-19 thing, I thought we could do something like this. But in general, this type of more casual content needs to live a little elsewhere. Who's doing the next live stream? We'll do more live streams. It just might not necessarily be this type of format. So thank you everyone so much. I've really enjoyed doing the Downtime 2020 series. Very meaningful for me that you've all been here with the support, saying nice things. It's taken a lot of energy, but it's been very fun. Why not make another YouTube channel? I might do that. That is definitely an option. I just feel weird about having a channel that I might go to once in a while and I might not go to. So that is definitely one of those options. Thank you again, everyone. This has been Downtime 2020, Watches at Home with Ariel Adams. I am Ariel Adams, founder of aBlogtoWatch. You guys have been great. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.